LuckyShots podcast with your hosts, Ricky Larson and Brock Loftus, presented by Lucky Shots Media.
Welcome into another week of the Lucky Shots podcast. I am your host, Ricky Larson. And again, boys and girls, we are missing Brock this week. Should be back next week, ready to roll, so look forward to that and tune in next week to hear him. It's been a long week. You know, you got some, I guess you could call them upsets. Just kind of surprising performances by certain teams, and just a lot going on. So, without further ado, let's hop into some news.
Breaking news.
Alright, so one of the biggest stories this week was that Le'Veon Bell was released from the Jets, and there was a lot of different landing spots for him. Some of those included the Dolphins, the Browns, the Bills, places like that. All places, you know, I'm sure he would have fit just fine. But then, I mean, looking back at it, makes the most sense for him, at least. He was signed by the Kansas City Chiefs. So what does this mean for the Chiefs? Well, I like the idea of it. You know, you've got Clyde Edwards-Helaire in that backfield, obviously a standout rookie thus far, and now you add a veteran like Le'Veon Bell. Obviously, he is not a superstar anymore, but if you can keep those two fresh throughout a game, you know, then you've got a fresh back throughout the game. They both have very unique skill sets, very good for certain situations, and, you know, they could complement each other, and they could definitely complement this Chiefs offense that is already overpowering. And, you know, he didn't play last week because he was freshly signed, had to go through all the COVID tests. He should be in this week, and you know, I don't think he's somebody fantasy-wise that you could plug in right away. Obviously, you want to see kind of where they're going to go with how, you know, with Clyde Edwards-Helaire, how they're going to split up the two, you know, splitting carries. So, but as for Clyde Edwards-Helaire, if you are a owner of him, then you know, I don't think you need to worry. Yes, I think his production will get cut into as they try to work Le'Veon Bell in, but at least for this week, I don't see there being a huge impact by Le'Veon Bell, but you never know. But I think Clyde Edwards-Helaire, regardless, is still going to be a great back, and I think it probably demotes him to a flex position for the rest of the year. But, you know, again, just something you got to keep an eye on. Some more running back news. Melvin Gordon was charged with a DUI last Thursday. Didn't play in Sunday's game. It wasn't because of his DUI. They were going to let him play. He ended up getting sick. Don't believe it was COVID related, but he didn't end up playing anyway. And kind of interesting to see what's going to happen. I mean, the team initially wasn't going to take any action towards him. So, obviously, when all the charges are done, he goes to court and does all of that, then I'm sure we'll see some sort of punishment handed down. But for the foreseeable next few weeks, he should still be in and should be somebody that you can start. But that does bring us to Phillip Lindsay, who had a 100-yard game last week against New England, didn't score a touchdown, but you can credit that to Denver scoring 0 touchdowns as it is. Boom, boom, kicker of the week, Brandon McManus. Go get that guy. 24 points last week, 6 for 6. scored all the Broncos points, and they beat New England. So, again, Melvin Gordon, keep an eye on him and keep an eye on that story. Another breaking story yesterday kind of hurts my heart a little bit. I have been, and many people have been giving Ryan Fitzpatrick a lot of love. He's been doing great this season. The only people not giving him love are the Dolphins. So they've got a bye week this week, and reports are, after the bye week, they will start Tua Tagovailoa. And what a welcome to the NFL for him. He's playing the Rams. So welcome to the NFL featuring Aaron Donald. We'll see how it goes, but I don't like that you have to start your career against probably the best defensive player in the league right now. But that's something you could have expected at some point. I mean, I'm sure everybody was expecting it, and if you weren't, hello, Tua Tagovailoa. They drafted him in the first round, 5th pick, I think. So you knew at some point he was going to be put into this offense, and I guess the best time would be right after a bye, but I probably would have held off until after you guys played the Rams. But, your choice. Christian McCaffrey, not likely to play this week. He is close, but when you have Coach Matt Rule going out and saying, I'm not sure if he'll be back this week or next week or the week after, not a good sign. I wouldn't expect him back for, another maybe 2 weeks. He is very close. It could be next week at the soonest. But when your head coach makes a statement like that, I would expect at least another 3 weeks, which kind of makes it tough if you've been holding on to him all year, the consensus number 1 pick in fantasy drafts, and you might only get him for a small stretch before your league playoffs. That's tough. But it is Christian McCaffrey, and if you keep it close in your league, then he's somebody that could help you make a run late in the year. So obviously you're not going to drop him, and obviously you're going to plug him in right away. But yeah, again, another few weeks, I think, before he is fully back. Isn't this fun news? The Washington football team has stated that they are going to keep their name into the 2021 season. Congratulations, Washington. I think you should be renamed to the Washington Unoriginals. Come on, football team. That's not a football team's name, okay? Everybody's a football team, not just Washington. Anyway, moving on. Kind of a very interesting story here. The Cowboys players on record saying our coaches are underprepared and not good at their jobs. Well, all right then. Tell us how you really feel. I think you got to cut the coaches some slack when your number 1 guy, your franchise quarterback, goes down. Nobody's really prepared for that. You're never prepared for something catastrophic to happen like that. And they pretty much had the best preparation plan that they could have, having Andy Dalton as that backup. Although last week was not a good welcome to the Dallas Cowboys for Andy Dalton. In my opinion, the Cowboys are just bad. Just bad. And if you watched them against Arizona, yeah, they're just bad. Raheem Mostert is to be placed on IR with a high ankle sprain, which means he's out at least 3 weeks. And this one hurts me. Raheem Mostert, man. The guy is a big play waiting to happen. and now he's going out for at least another 3 weeks after missing 2 or 3 weeks earlier this season. Kind of hard to manage somebody like that, but, that's okay. When he comes back, he came back this week. This was his comeback week, and did well. Only played a half of football, but tried to come back in. Wasn't working. That high ankle sprain, same kind of Christian McCaffrey injury right there. So at least 3 weeks for him. And if you've got him rostered, you're going to have to pivot somewhere else. Sticking with the running back position, Miles Sanders out for Thursday night. It's a 1 to 2 week timeline for him, but most likely will be out the next 3 weeks because they have a bye after this 2 week timeline. So if you're looking to be playing Miles Sanders, you're going to have to pivot away from him for at least the next 3 weeks. Zach Ertz out the next 3 to 4 weeks. I don't imagine you were starting Zach Ertz anyway. He's just been absolutely terrible. Did hear a funny joke yesterday. Listened to quite a few different fantasy football podcasts, and my favorite one, they love to poke fun at Zach Ertz, and they were highlighting that he was looking for a new contract, wanted more money, and then one of the guys goes, in light of Zach Ertz looking for more money, he may be getting a sponsorship with Tide. And they're like, why? And he's like, because he's washed. I don't know. I thought it was funny. Probably throw in a little bit of the barata there. But, Zach Ertz, been terrible. And out for 3 to 4 weeks. They have Dallas Goedert coming back here pretty soon. The Eagles, that is. So, not really big news with Zach Ertz there. But if you were in a tight spot and you were starting him, you're going to have to go somewhere else. Jonnu Smith, questionable for this coming Sunday. Probably just put him down as doubtful. And if you're looking to pivot away from him, there's another Titans tight end who we will highlight in the top performers. But Jonnu Smith out for at least this week and should be hopefully back next week for you. Corey Davis from Tennessee as well. Finally off the COVID list, so that's some good news there. Good news for Ryan Tannehill as well. Because, he's had quite a few receivers out with COVID, so probably be good to get some of them back. Sterling Shepard for the Giants could play this week. They play tomorrow, Thursday, today. Our timeline's all funky. But could be playing. Good news for the Giants. As a fantasy manager, you probably don't care too much because Sterling Shepard isn't a starting wide receiver, maybe a flex option at the most. But there's some news. And then, we always got to talk about him every week. Adam Gase. He was asked this week if he would relinquish his play calling duties. He said that is step 10 of the Jets process, and the Jets are currently on step 2. So how the hell does this guy still have a job? I don't know. Anyway, that is the breaking news of the week. Let's move on to the boomers.
Boom, boom,
All right, at the quarterback position, the quarterback one was Deshaun Watson. He had 335 passing yards, 26 rushing yards, and 4 touchdowns for 32 fantasy points. Came in their loss to Tennessee, but Deshaun Watson, you're definitely happy to see it. 2 straight weeks after Bill O'Brien has left, and Deshaun Watson is a top 5 quarterback, making the receivers for Houston top 15, top 25. The offense is starting to take off, and you like to see it. Houston had every chance to win that game. If they hadn't missed on a 2-point conversion, possibly would have won that game. So great showing from Deshaun Watson, and definitely somebody you need to get on your roster if you don't have him. He's not widely available, but if you can trade for him, something like that, I would get him in your lineup. Matt Ryan, where have you been all season? Quarterback 2 this week, 371 passing yards, 8 rushing yards, and 4 touchdowns. Gotta love to see it, mostly because I don't think anybody would be starting Matt Ryan, but when he throws for 371 yards, that means Julio Jones and Calvin Ridley are both having good games, which they did this week. 3 touchdowns between the two. So Matt Ryan, your quarterback 2 for the week. Carson Wentz, what is this top 5? I don't understand how Matt Ryan and Carson Wentz jumped in here, but they did. Carson Wentz had 213 passing yards, 49 rushing yards, 3 touchdowns, and a 2-point conversion, and had a fumble. I mean, what would a Carson Wentz game be without a fumble? But that gave him 29.42 fantasy points on the week, and another pretty decent matchup here on Thursday against the Giants. So maybe a repeat. You never know. Kyler Murray, the quarterback 4 this week, 188 passing yards, 74 rushing yards, and 3 touchdowns for 28.92 fantasy points. And this one also shocks me. Good thing he got 3 touchdowns because he only completed 9 passes. Who is your quarterback, Arizona? Quarterbacks are supposed to complete passes, and he only had 9 completions. Interesting. But still got the 28.92 fantasy points, so you're happy if you had him in your lineup. And then you got the quarterback rounding everything out, Ryan Tannehill, 364 passing yards, 4 touchdowns, a 2-point conversion. He did have an interception and a fumble, which would have actually put him up over Deshaun Watson had he not had those 2 turnovers. Finished with 28.56 fantasy points. The Titans, man, they're just looking really good. And when you have Ryan Tannehill playing well, and then you have Derrick Henry doing Derrick Henry things, you're gonna have a good day. And speaking of Derrick Henry, he is the running back 1 this week. 212 rushing yards, 2 receptions, 52 receiving yards, and 3 touchdowns for 40.4 fantasy points. And also, did anybody realize just how big Derrick Henry is? Yes, he is a massive human. He is 250 pounds, and the man had a 94-yard touchdown run. 250 pounds outran an entire defense for the whole length of the football field. That is a scary proposition. Dear Lord, 250 pounds moving that fast. Would not want to stand in front of that guy. Don't stop your car on the train tracks kind of thing. Dear Lord. Kenyon Drake is the number 2 running back this week. Thank you, Dallas defense, for making Kenyon Drake relevant for a week. 164 rushing yards, 2 touchdowns, 28.4 fantasy points. I don't expect that to happen anymore this season. Kenyon Drake has been literally awful. But it's nice to see him have a big game. And if you're a Kenyon Drake owner, you definitely were happy to finally get some production out of him. DeAndre Swift, the running back 3 this week. Finally, DeAndre Swift does something. I remember I was watching week 1, Detroit versus Green Bay. DeAndre Swift had a chance at a touchdown that week, and it hit him squarely in the hands, and he somehow dropped it. But finally a big week for him. 116 rushing yards, 3 receptions for 7 yards and 2 touchdowns, giving him 27.3 fantasy points and making him the running back 3. And is it something we can continue to expect? I think so. Adrian Peterson hasn't given you any single game like this season. And DeAndre Swift, after playing as well as he did, I think you can expect his volume to go up. I can expect he will be the top back in Detroit. So another guy who is, I'm pretty sure, about 60% rostered, something like that. So if you can pick him up, go do it. If you can trade for him, I wouldn't sell your barn, but if you can trade for him, definitely do that. Ronald Jones, the running back for this week, about the only bright spot of that Tampa Bay offense. 113 rushing yards, 2 receptions for 8 yards, and 2 touchdowns for 26.1 fantasy points. So, most everybody probably expected Ronald Jones to actually do something, and he is. And I expect him to continue to be a top 10 running back throughout the rest of the year because, again, like I said last week, Tom Brady is done. And he did not do anything this week to make my opinion change. So, moving on to the number 5 running back this week, Clyde Edwards-Helaire, 161 rushing yards, 4 receptions for 8 yards, making him have 20.9 fantasy points this week. Again, we highlighted it earlier, Le'Veon Bell coming in. I can still expect Clyde Edwards-Helaire to probably be a top 15 running back for the remainder of the year. And I like his upside, even though Le'Veon Bell has come in, because Le'Veon Bell isn't a top running back anymore, in my opinion. But we'll just have to wait and see how that plays out. Moving on to the wide receivers, Justin Jefferson. I'll get more into... Let me just tell you the stats, okay? 9 receptions, 166 yards, 2 touchdowns, and a 2-point conversion for 39.6 fantasy points. I was very happy, very, very happy to have Justin Jefferson on my team this week. Not so much last week, but the 2 weeks before that, I was happy as well. What makes me unhappy is Kirk Cousins, okay? The guy, I think, before every game, he just picks a name out of a hat and says, I'm going to throw to this guy and nobody else for the entire game. Because Justin Jefferson last week, 3 catches, something like that. Absolutely just atrocious game. Not his fault. They were only throwing the ball to Adam Thielen last week. This week, Justin Jefferson, 9 catches. Adam Thielen, 2 or 3. Thielen still got a touchdown, but I do not like how streaky Kirk Cousins is. But if you've got chances to have one or the other receiver in that offense do what Justin Jefferson did this week, Adam Thielen did last week, then, I guess you can't complain about it too much. Julio Jones is finally fantasy relevant. 8 catches, 137 yards, and 2 touchdowns for 33.7 fantasy points this week. And like I said, when Matt Ryan actually plays well, you like it as a Julio Jones and Calvin Ridley owner. Do I see Matt Ryan continuing to do this? No, but hopefully he does, so we can have Julio Jones and Calvin Ridley both getting big numbers. Will Fuller V, 6 catches, 123 yards, and a touchdown for 24.3 fantasy points. Again, that Houston offense starting to take off. So you love to see that for not only Deshaun Watson, but his surrounding receivers. Brandon Cooks, I believe, was in the top 5 last week, and he wasn't too far out this week. So, go Houston for fantasy purposes. Christian Kirk breaks the top 5 with 2 catches. 2 catches, 86 yards, and 2 touchdowns for 22.6 fantasy points. But, I mean, if you look at the 9 completions of Kyler Murray, 2 catches is a lot. That's nearly a fourth of all of the passing offense. So, great job for Christian Kirk this week. And then A.J. Brown, 5 catches for 56 yards and 2 touchdowns for 22.6 fantasy points, tying Christian Kirk. So, technically, we have a top 4 receivers because they tied. But A.J. Brown, your wide receiver 5 this week. Tight end position, this first guy, I had never, ever heard of him before. Jonnu Smith went out, and this is what I said your pivot move could be with Jonnu Smith being out for at least this week. It was Anthony Ferkser. He was the number 1 tight end this week with 8 catches, 113 yards, and a touchdown for 25.3 fantasy points. To be a backup tight end and see volume of 8 catches is huge, and that is a big pivot move if Jonnu Smith misses this week or weeks after. Number 2 tight end on the week, George Kittle returns to his rightful place in the top 5 with 7 catches, 109 yards, and a touchdown for 23.9 fantasy points. Your tight end 3, Trey Burton, 4 catches, 58 yards, 1 rushing yard for 2 touchdowns. Interestingly enough, you don't see tight ends with rushing touchdowns, but that 1 rushing yard translated to 1 rushing touchdown for Trey Burton. Normally you'll see a wide receiver, on an end around or something like that. Plug in Chase Claypool and Tyreek Hill. They do a little bit of running like that, but normally you don't see that from the tight end, and Trey Burton has a rushing touchdown as a tight end. Travis Kelce, shocker, he's in the top 5. The number 4 tight end this week, 5 catches, 65 yards, and 2 touchdowns. He did have a fumble, which would have put him right up there, almost tied with George Kittle. He only had 21.5 fantasy points. Only. Why did I say only? That's huge for tight end. But again, had that fumble and knocked him down a few spots. But yes, Travis Kelce, top 5 every single week. You can't change my mind. And then Darren Fells. Again, the Houston Texans passing offense is taking off, and Darren Fells is a beneficiary of that as well. The tight end 5 this week with 6 receptions, 85 yards, and a touchdown for 20.5 fantasy points. Those were your boomers this week. Let's move on to the bombers.
Bombs away.
All right, at the quarterback position, we had some very abysmal performances, to be honest. Drew Lock, 3.46 fantasy points, and as a Broncos fan, I swear he was trying to lose that game. He was trying everything in his power to lose the football game to the Patriots. But I guess also some of that was not his fault. The Broncos deciding when they had to run out the clock that they needed to throw the football on a first down, and then, insert Drew Lock, who just heaves it down the field, pretty much punting the ball on first down, getting it intercepted. But Drew Lock just did not look good this week. It was his return week, so, maybe against Kansas City he can do something more, but I doubt it. Kansas City is a just stout team as it is. Aaron Rodgers. This one was a shocker. Only had 3.8 fantasy points. And Tampa Bay just harassed this guy all game. They sent pressure at him the entire time. And I think it was maybe a third of the way through the fourth quarter, and the entire Green Bay offense was benched, obviously just to keep everybody healthy. But Aaron Rodgers looked absolutely terrible this week, and I expect a bounce back week. I mean, it's Green Bay and it's Aaron Rodgers, but again, just not something you expected from Aaron Rodgers coming off of a bye week. Baker Mayfield, 5.26 fantasy points. Baker's just bad. And throw in a rib injury on top of it, you would think if you have a rib injury, you're not going to stand in the pocket and just continue to get hit and get hit and get hit. You figure you're probably going to try to throw the ball very quickly. Baker did not do that. He got benched, and it was just not a good outing for him. Joe Flacco, not a shocker, comes in for the Jets. Yeah, not going to be good. 5.4 fantasy points, and again, he plays for the Jets. Adam Gase is the head coach. He's not going to score more than 10 points this year. That's my bold statement. Gotta have one every week, right? And then you got Teddy Bridgewater, which was also kind of a shocker coming off of his big week last week. Only had 9.4 fantasy points, but he did have some tough competition, and he's a streaming quarterback at best, so you can't be too upset with less than 10 points this week. I doubt he was being started in any leagues, but if he was, then he definitely burned you. Going on to the running back position, Rex Burkhead, only 1.4 fantasy points. James White has come back and pretty much taken over the bulk of the running back position. But Rex Burkhead, he had those couple of big weeks and seemed like he might be fantasy relevant. You might have gone out on the waiver wire, spent some fab on him, but I don't think, especially with James White being back, I don't think Rex Burkhead is a fantasy option at all in any sense anymore. And he showed it this week with only 1.4 fantasy points. Mark Ingram, I believe he actually got injured. I am not sure. Regardless, he only got 2 points, and he's not been a fantasy relevant running back, so not a shocker there. Alexander Mattison, this one probably burned a lot of people. Dalvin Cook being out, Alexander Mattison was one of the top running back pickups, especially after he came in for Dalvin Cook and had 20 carries for 100 yards. And I'm pretty sure he was the top running back picked up this last week. And you plugged him in because you were like, yes, a decent option in place of Dalvin Cook. He was not. Only 4 points. And Kirk Cousins had to take over that game, which, if Kirk Cousins is having to take over a game for your team, you're in trouble. Kareem Hunt, only 7.7 fantasy points, but Cleveland's offense just didn't look good at all. They got trounced by the Steelers, but you would hope, even getting trounced, that Kareem Hunt would still produce, being the kind of running back he is, but he did not, and it was tough. It was tough. And then you had Todd Gurley, 9.7 fantasy points, finally returning to his rightful place in fantasy football, in my opinion. Had the 2 pretty big weeks, so if you're his manager, you definitely were happy with those, and then this week happened, and you were like, oh, here we go again. Who knows? Who knows what Todd Gurley will do the rest of the year, but bottom 5 this week. At the fantasy wide receiver position, you had Mike Evans only get 2 points. It doesn't help when your passing offense is terrible, in my opinion. But Mike Evans, this is a thing that could have happened many other times during this season. He had a few weeks ago 2 catches for 2 yards and 2 touchdowns. Had they not been touchdowns, he would have had another week just like this one, but only, 1 catch for 10 yards. And when it's kind of embarrassing when Rob Gronkowski has more catches, more targets, and more yardage than you in your offense, where you are the number one playmaker. But kind of a tough week. I don't know what to tell you, whether you should expect it again or not. I think Mike Evans this year has just been touchdown dependent. Yes, he's had a few good games where he has been able to rack up more than 5 catches, but I feel like he's touchdown dependent. So, but you can't sit him. T.Y. Hilton, 2.1 fantasy points. If you haven't dropped T.Y. Hilton yet, do it and don't look back. He's not going to do anything else the rest of the season. If you're going to even give a Colts wide receiver the time of day, it would be Zach Pascal in my opinion. But yeah, definitely not T.Y. Hilton. Get rid of him. Don't have him. Forget him. Juju Smith-Schuster, only 2.6 fantasy points. He's been a topic of discussion for a little while. When he is their number one guy. He is in a contract year, but they just don't give him the ball in good opportunity situations. It's a lot of screens, a lot of short routes. You got to give the guy some more shots. I mean, you don't drop Juju at all, but you just worry about how Pittsburgh implements him in their game plan. You had Cooper Kupp, 4.1 fantasy points. The Rams offense just didn't look good at all this past week, so I wouldn't expect Cooper Kupp to repeat this performance, but definitely just kind of disappointing, especially playing a 49ers defense that got carved up by the late Ryan Fitzpatrick. But I mean, that was just an ugly game for the Rams in my opinion, but I think they could probably turn it around, have a decent week this week, and Cooper Kupp remains a start for you. Then you have Julian Edelman, 4.32 fantasy points. If you have to start Julian Edelman in a pinch, I guess you can, but I don't think he should be rostered anymore. He's bad. Not bad, just old, and the offense doesn't really work in his favor anymore. So, I would get rid of Julian Edelman. I expect him to have more weeks like this than I expect him to have weeks where he's a maybe top 10 wide receiver. At the tight end position, you got Mike Gesicki giving you the good old goose egg. Wow. A lot of people were ready for Mike Gesicki to have a big week. I highlighted him last week that he was a valuable start with the way Ryan Fitzpatrick has been playing, and Ryan Fitzpatrick played well last week as well, and Mike Gesicki just did not touch the football, and that's disappointing. Jonnu Smith with 2.3 points, but again, he was injured, and that's just not a Jonnu Smith thing. Eric Ebron, 2.9 fantasy points. Kind of tough. But when you have Chase Claypool kind of coming in and taking over, it doesn't leave a lot of room for everybody else. I think Eric Ebron, especially with how slim the tight end position is, think he's still somebody you can roster. I don't think you can count on him for huge games, but he could give you consistent games. This is kind of more or less what he's been doing, but he does have the opportunity to have some good games with Big Ben throwing him the football. Mark Andrews, 4.1 fantasy points. Man, the inconsistency of the tight end position is just hard. You've got Mark Andrews, who, again, he's a touchdown-dependent guy, but you have Mark Andrews, who normally catches a touchdown every week. Didn't catch one this week. And if he had, he would have been right at the place where he normally is, around 10 to 15 points. But just a tough week for him. And then Robert Tonyan, I feel kind of bad. I've been preaching that this guy is going to do something. He's relevant. And then he only puts up 5.5 fantasy points. I just chalk that up to the whole Packers team, Packers offense not looking good. But, oh man, that's tough. Because, I started him in both of my leagues this week. Got burned in both the leagues with him. Still was able to win, but not the production that I hoped for, and not the production that I preached to you guys, and it just hurts my feelings. All right, that is it for the Bombers this week. If you had anybody that was bombing for you and you need some sort of replacement, then I got you covered. We got some waiver claims. Let's get into it. All right, at the quarterback position, not a very popular opinion. I'm good at doing that in this waiver section, aren't I? I said Drew Lock might be a waiver pickup last week, and then he had a total stinker game. But Kyle Allen, he's the quarterback, 34. I think I just have him on here because he's playing Dallas, and he's only 2.4% rostered. If you have a quarterback on bye, then he's a great streaming option. He could definitely put up some points against the Dallas defense. Dallas's defense obviously is terrible. It doesn't make me super comfortable that Kyler Murray only completed 9 passes against them, but it wasn't because they were good or stopping him. It was that he was just not hitting his receivers. So I think Kyle Allen is a decent pickup this week just because he's playing Dallas. He's definitely not a long-term thing at all, but when you have a quarterback playing Dallas, definitely start them. Ryan Tannehill, he's the quarterback 9 this year and is playing Pittsburgh this next week. He's still only 66% rostered, which that seems like a high number, but in the quarterback area, that's not very good. Especially when he's a top 10 quarterback. So go see if he is available, because the guy's been lighting it up and playing well. And, he's getting some of his receiving core back, so he could start doing even better. Top 10 quarterback. Very, very good option. Moving on to the next guy, Derek Carr. Quarterback 18, playing Tampa Bay this week. Told you to pick him up last week as well. The opportunity is still open. He's only 29.1% owned. I don't know exactly if I want to start him this week, playing Tampa Bay and seeing their defense last week against Green Bay, and we'll highlight their defense a little more later, but Derek Carr, kind of a tough start this week, but he's a top 20 quarterback. He played very well in his last game against Kansas City. So, he's somebody you can pick up and roster. and play him based on matchups, but I would not play him this week. Derek Carr is not Aaron Rodgers, and Tampa Bay absolutely annihilated Aaron Rodgers. So, he's the little food for thought. He could be a guy you go out and get. Tua Tagovailoa. He's not playing this week. As we highlighted, he has a bye and then steps in against the LA Rams. He is only 5.9% rostered, but again, he'd be a pickup like Derek Carr. I would not start Tua in his first career start against the Rams, but he's somebody you want on your bench, because if he does start to take off, starts to do well, and has matchups that aren't the Rams, you don't want to try to pick him up later. He's a stash and see type of player, and you never know. Rookies are unpredictable and can do some crazy things, so get Tua at least on your bench and keep an eye on him. Then we have the running back position, DeAndre Swift, the running back 25 this year. We highlighted that he had that great week last week, and he's playing Atlanta this week. He is 81.5% rostered, but go check your waiver wire, because in my secondary league, he was on the waiver wire, and I was able to pick him up. And I am in desperate need of running backs in that league. So don't just assume that he is taken in your league because he is so highly rostered. You could have had some people drop him at some point for somebody else because he wasn't producing. So go take a look, because like I said, I think he is going to start being their number one back and going to start producing, maybe not in the gigantic capacity that he did this week, but I think he could turn into a consistent 15 or so points every single week. J.D. McKissick, the running back 37, and when Antonio Gibson was a waiver wire guy last week, J.D. McKissick with Kyle Allen just came in and took over. I mean, I think Antonio Gibson is still a good running back and a valuable one that if you're in a deeper league or in running back trouble, you can have. But I think if you're going to have him, you also need to have J.D. McKissick, because McKissick came in and pretty much took all of the load last week, and he's playing Dallas this week. So he's one that you definitely need to look at, especially since he's only 33% roster. He's got a good matchup, and the way that he was utilized last week is something that could be a flex option. And then you have Boston Scott. We highlighted that Miles Sanders was going to be out this week. Could be out multiple weeks, but Boston Scott is going to come in and take a big bulk of the Miles Sanders load. They'll obviously split it between him and I cannot remember who the other guy is, but he's playing the Giants this week as well, and he's only 11% rostered. So if he's taking over Miles Sanders' job while Miles Sanders is away, and he's playing the Giants, who just are bad, he's a valuable pickup. Probably only a 1 to 2 week rental, but especially if you're hurting at running back, he is a guy that you should go out and get, especially if you're the Miles Sanders owner. Moving on to the wide receiver position, Travis Fulgham is my top wide receiver to pick up. 1, because he's playing the Giants. 2, because he's only played, I think, 3 games now and is the wide receiver 35, and he's only 62% rostered. He's just continually getting a large volume of targets, so go out and get him. He's also a touchdown machine, 3 touchdowns in 3 weeks, and I have him in one of my leagues, and I'm even playing him this week over, I think it's Justin Jackson, and possibly over Allen Robinson because of Allen Robinson's matchup. I don't like it. And when it comes between Travis Fulgham and Justin Jackson, Travis Fulgham, I have more confidence in getting a touchdown because of his volume and because he has a touchdown in the last 3 weeks. The next guy is T. Higgins. He's the wide receiver 32 and playing Cleveland this upcoming week. He's only 58.5% rostered. And, you know, I've been preaching on T. Higgins for a while. He is somebody that I told somebody in my league to go pick up and start playing because they had AJ Green. And finally, last week it paid off for them. I believe he had somewhere in the neighborhood of 18 to 20 fantasy points. So go out and get T. Higgins. He's turning into the top guy in Cincinnati. Yes, AJ Green also had a great week this week, but T. Higgins is the more consistent and more targeted Cincinnati receiver, and I think you should go get him because he's just looking good and looking consistent. Then you have Keelan Cole Jr. I believe he plays for Jacksonville. Correct me if I'm wrong. But he's playing the Chargers this week, is only 20% rostered, and is actually a top 20 wide receiver at wide receiver 20. So he's another guy that you can go out, pick him up, and he's going to get some points for you. He may not be as consistent as the first two guys that I highlighted, but he is a guy that, one, is higher ranked than them. So I guess he's got some sort of consistency being a top 20 wide receiver, but he's not owned, and he's somebody that you could probably go get for cheap, get very easily, and plug into your lineup, and he's going to get you some points. At the tight end position, you have Trey Burton. Obviously, if you need a tight end this week, don't pick him up to play this week. But the way he played last week, the involvement that he had, he's definitely a guy that you have to put on your roster because of how inconsistent and honestly terrible the tight end position is this year. So go get Trey Burton, put him in your lineup next week, not this week, and I think you're going to be happy with those results. Darren Fells, playing Green Bay this week. He's the tight end 15 and only 5% rostered. We have highlighted that the Houston offense is just doing very well and starting to throw the ball a lot more, and all of the receivers are beneficiaries of it. And I mean, I'm not sold on Darren Fells being a top tight end, but when you have the type of volume that is coming out of Deshaun Watson and the plenty of targets to go around, I think Darren Fells is a good look, especially this week playing Green Bay, who let Rob Gronkowski run all over him. And I mean, I'm not throwing any dirt on Rob Gronkowski's name, but he is not Rob Gronkowski anymore. He is Rob Gronkowski. I don't know. I was going for something there. Didn't work out. And then my third tight end to kind of look at, he's actually the tight end 20 this year, which is low, yes, because the tight end position isn't huge. But he is playing Dallas this week and is only 10.1% rostered. He had a good game last week, and going up against a defense that isn't very good against the pass, I am in to go pick him up. That was our waiver claims this week. So, there's more guys than just the ones that I have highlighted. Just go out and look, because like I said, my situation with DeAndre Swift, you never know who is going to be on the waiver wire, who has dropped who to pick up somebody, and it could be somebody that's going to help you out. So go check out your waiver wire and make sure that you've got, all that you can get. Alrighty, that is it for our waiver claims. Let's move into the starts of the week.
Let me in, coach.
All right, my start of the week at quarterback is Josh Allen. And I mean, yes, it's kind of a no-brainer, but some people may be hesitant, especially after the last couple of weeks he's had. He's not played well the last 2 weeks, but he's playing the Jets. Okay, so why would you not start him? I mean, they've already played the Jets once this year, scored 31 points. The Jets are absolutely terrible. I mean, start everybody against the Jets. You could even start Devin Singletary against the Jets, but you should have other options. I'm just saying. At the running back position, Ezekiel Elliott playing the Washington football team. Some people may call me crazy, especially after last week. He had the 2 fumbles, still hasn't rushed for 100 yards. But, I'm not going to read into the 2 fumbles very much because I don't think it's going to cut into his production at all. I don't think that they are just magically going to take the ball out of Zeke's hands now because he fumbled twice last week. I think he's still going to be somebody that they lean on, especially because Andy Dalton did not play well last week. And yeah, it's going to take some time for him to gel into the offense, but Zeke Elliott is going to be that crutch. And Washington isn't necessarily the greatest defense of all time, but they do have a decent defense. But I am still bought into Zeke Elliott. I think he's going to have a good week. If he doesn't, sue me, I guess. But I like his matchup. I like the situation for him. So Zeke Elliott is my running back start of the week. And then at the wide receiver position, DeAndre Hopkins. Okay, he didn't have a great week last week. I think did he still score a touchdown? I cannot remember. But he's playing Seattle. Okay, and if we learned anything about Seattle's defense, it's that fantasy passing games go kaboom when they play Seattle. So DeAndre Hopkins, I mean, he's kind of an obvious start, but another one of those where you're kind of wondering because of the lack of output from Kyler Murray last week and the lack of production resulting from that for DeAndre Hopkins. But playing Seattle, definite start this week. At the tight end position, Travis Kelce. Again, duh, okay, but he's playing Denver, and that just spells a great matchup. I'd even venture to say Travis Kelce is going to be the number 1 tight end this coming week. I mean, yes, I'm a Broncos fan, but our defense isn't fantastic. They did great last week against the Patriots. So, maybe they'll surprise me, but Travis Kelce's still going to get his targets, probably going to get a touchdown, maybe 2. So, Travis Kelce, the start of the week at tight end. And then the defense. Oh, man, this is a tough one to say. But I'm saying the Eagles defense against the New York Giants. You got Daniel fumbled Jones, turned the ball over so many times. I think I highlighted a little later, but the Eagles defense and playing on Thursday night, divisional game, I think they just get after Daniel Jones. And it's not like the Giants really have a running game. Saquon is out, everybody knows that. And Devontae Freeman hasn't necessarily been doing everything fantastically. I think they're gonna have to end up throwing the ball. Could turn into some sort of shootout, and if you're putting the ball in Daniel Jones's hands, it's not good news. And I think the Eagles defense is going to benefit from that this week. Moving on from the starts of the week, we're going on to the sits of the week.
Get on the bench.
All right, at the quarterback position, we have Baker Mayfield. I don't know if the Browns are going to bench him this week. I mean, he does have a rib issue, hasn't played well for really the whole season. And if they do play him, he's playing Cincinnati, which you would think, oh, that's a decent matchup. Maybe I could start him. No, you can't. I feel like the only plausible person to start from the Cleveland Browns offense is Kareem Hunt. The running game has been the entire Cleveland offense, and Baker Mayfield has looked terrible. So even if he plays, do not start him. Put him on your bench. At the running back position, Darrell Henderson Jr., he's been a really solid running back all year, but he's playing Chicago, and Chicago is 5-1, and I'm going to say not thanks to their offense. Okay, they've got a great defense, a great rushing defense, and Darrell Henderson didn't even look good last week playing the banged up 49ers. So he's one that I would get out of your starting lineup this week. At wide receiver, I'm going to stack on top of saying to sit Baker Mayfield and say sit Odell Beckham Jr. playing Cincinnati. When Baker Mayfield isn't playing well, when the quarterback of a team isn't playing well, his surrounding pieces, wide receiver, tight end, things like that, do not play well. And Odell, he had that one big week. I said I wasn't still sold on Odell. I'm still not. And I think you sit him this week because of just the way they played last week, the way Odell played last week. And, we got more of the boo-hoo, poor me, I'm Odell Beckham Jr. and I'm going to throw my helmet around type of guy last week. And I think if he carries in another sour attitude this week, it's just nothing's going to work out well in that situation. On to the tight end, Dalton Schultz playing Washington. Andy Dalton, I think he's going to eventually get it. But he didn't get it last week, didn't play well. Dalton Schultz was nearly non-existent. So I think you set Dalton Schultz. I don't think you're going to let him go. But he is a guy that you're just going to have to kind of set on your bench and wait until this offense kind of picks up with Andy Dalton. And then the sit this defense of the week, the New York Jets, obviously. They're playing the Bills. The Bills torched them the last time they played. And again, the Jets are terrible. Set everything that has to do with the Jets, except for maybe Jamison Crowder. But the Jets defense, definitely not even a blink of an eyelash should you think about putting them in against the Buffalo offense. That's it for sits of the week. Let's get into a kind of new segment, drop or hold.
Drop or hold, your choice.
All right, so this is more of a conversational one, and as Brock isn't here this week, might be a little boring. It's probably something we'll keep and discuss when he's back, and I think it'll be a better segment. But I'll give you my opinions on some drop or hold candidates. We're going to start out with Baker Mayfield. Drop or hold Baker Mayfield. Definitely drop him. Highlighted him in the sits of the week, so I don't really need to go any more into that. You drop Baker Mayfield, you don't look back. Joe Burrow. I would hold Joe Burrow. It's not like he's playing terribly. He is a rookie quarterback. He's had some stiff competition the past few weeks. And when a game is more favorable for him, I think he's going to start producing more and playing better. And he's got T. Higgins, AJ Green still, he's got plenty of a surrounding cast. I think you still hold on to Joe Burrow until he shows you in a game that he should do well, that he isn't going to do well. I just think he's been the unfortunate. He's just been on the wrong end of some bad matchups. Matt Ryan. The only reason I would say maybe don't drop him is because of this last week. But before this week, he only had week 1 that was decent. So 2 out of 4 weeks. I don't know if it's a consistent thing that you can count on. But it just depends on what your quarterback situation is. If you're kind of hurting at quarterback and don't necessarily have all the options, then maybe you hold Matt Ryan. But there's a lot of other options. And honestly, I think I would rather stream quarterbacks than start Matt Ryan every week. So I would say drop Matt Ryan, and maybe if he's got a good matchup, then you think about maybe throwing him back into your lineup and starting him for a week. But other than that, I would say drop Matt Ryan. Leonard Fournette. The way that Ronald Jones is playing, and with Leonard Fournette not being healthy at all ever in his career, I would drop Leonard Fournette for sure. I don't think he is a relevant piece of this offense, especially with the way that Ronald Jones has been playing. So Leonard Fournette is a definite drop. And I'm going to go ahead with this next guy, Adrian Peterson, and say the same thing about him. Definite drop. DeAndre Swift, I think, is a week or two away from fully being the guy to be taking the handoffs in that backfield for Detroit. Adrian Peterson, I think he had one good game this year maybe, but he's not a guy that I would have rostered in the first place. But if you do have him, I say you can drop him. Josh Kelly. If you listened last week or the first couple of weeks, I wasn't sold on Josh Kelly. I was more sold on Justin Jackson, and Justin Jackson outplayed him last week. So I would say that Josh Kelly, that's a tough one because it's still going to be a committee running back system. But I would say that I would drop him because Justin Jackson he's emerged as the better running back in the first place. So I think Josh Kelly, a guy you can drop. Odell Beckham Jr. I don't know if I would... I don't think I would try to drop him before I try to trade him. I would try to trade him away for the sake of he is Odell Beckham Jr. and that name is flashy and people see his name and they have hope that, maybe I can get a couple of breakout weeks from Odell. So before you drop, I would say try to trade, but if nobody will trade for him, then he is a definite drop as well. Julian Edelman, definite drop. I don't need to go into that. Drop him. Let him go. Drop it like it's hot. DJ Moore. He's a tough one as well. This offense, I don't know. Because Robbie Anderson has walked into this offense and made it his and given DJ Moore a full ride to the bench. Not literally, but fantasy bench for sure. DJ Moore did have a good week. 2 weeks ago. But I think I would, if it was me, I would drop DJ Moore and go after guys that maybe are a little more consistent, but not consistently bad like DJ Moore. But yeah, I think I would drop DJ Moore. Robert Tonyan, the only reason he's on this list is because I preached him so much and he came out and didn't do well. But I'm definitely holding Robert Tonyan. It was just a bad week for that offense, and I want to see what kind of production he can get when the offense is running smoothly. Because, Devontae Adams came back in and definitely cut into Robert Tonyan's targets, but, the Tampa Bay defense also cut into Robert Tonyan's targets because they were harassing Aaron Rodgers the whole time. So I would hold Robert Tonyan, pay attention, make sure that he doesn't just continually do bad. I think if he's got another couple weeks where he produces the way he did this week, then you could drop him and look elsewhere. Austin Hooper, definite drop just because he's a part of that Cleveland offense, and unless they find a different quarterback or Baker Mayfield suddenly starts playing like a superstar, I don't trust any receiver for Cleveland. Again, I only believe in Nick Chubb when he comes back and Kareem Hunt. And then Zach Ertz, most definite drop. He's underproduced, been terrible. He's hurt now, and Dallas Goedert will be coming back within the next week or 3. I know, long timeline, but he is coming back. Zach Ertz is out for 4 to 6 weeks and is absolutely terrible. So I say drop him. Alrighty, that is it for the drop or hold. Let's get into some buy or sell.
Show me the money.
Alrighty, into the buy or sell. From last week, Brock and I started out with records of 5-3 for myself, and Brock 3 for 5. And this week did not treat us nicely either. So let's just hop right into it. Ezekiel Elliott has his first 100-yard game of the season. I bought it, and Brock sold it. And Brock's just a seer, I guess, because Zeke only had 49 yards on the ground. So that takes me down to 5-4, and Brock up to 4-5. Chase Claypool is a top 20 wide receiver. I just want to go on record and say I hope he does. I hope that he turns into a top 20 wide receiver, although I sold it. Should have bought it because he was the wide receiver 11 this past week. I sold it. Brock also sold it. And that takes me down to 5-5 and puts Brock up to 4-6. Adam Thielen, this one. If you watched last week, I misspoke and said we both definitely sell this when we definitely both bought it. I wish we would have sold it because Brock and I bought that Adam Thielen would have 7 catches and a touchdown. He only had 3 catches and a touchdown. So, can we have half a point? No, it's not how it works. Okay. Takes me down to 5-6. Takes Brock down to 4-7. The next one was the Rams defense three-peats as a top 5 defense against San Francisco. Brock and I both bought it. Turns out they did not three-peat. They had -1 fantasy points. Terrible. Absolutely terrible. The 49ers neutralized Aaron Donald. I don't think Aaron Donald disrupted the game at all, which is crazy. But Brock and I both bought that, and it knocked me down to 5-7 and knocked Brock down to 4-8. The final one of last week was Andy Dalton leads the Cowboys to a win against Arizona. Brock and I both sold that, and we were correct. The Cowboys lost to Arizona 38-10. It was embarrassing. They looked awful. So that takes me up to 6-7 and takes Brock up to 5-8. Definitely a typo there for myself, but 5-8 for Brock. All right, that's it for last week. Let's move into the week 7 buy or sell. All right, so the first one is Julio Jones has 100 yards or a touchdown against Detroit. He had 137 yards last week and 2 touchdowns. I still do not have Brock's buy or sells this week. I am texting him as of right now to figure that out. For this, I am a Julio owner, so I really hope it happens. And, 100 yards or a touchdown, I think I will buy that. I think he can get in the end zone. Detroit doesn't have a great defense, and to at least get in the end zone, I think that is a possibility. Next up is Le'Veon Bell has 15 touches against Buffalo. This is his first week playing with Kansas City, and, a lot of unknown in that area, but I'm going to sell this. I don't think Le'Veon Bell is that involved. I think he gets in there, maybe gets 10 touches, a few runs here and there, a couple of catches because he is Le'Veon Bell. But 15 just seems like a big workload, especially when you have Clyde Edwards-Helaire maybe touching the ball like 25 times a game in previous weeks. So I'm going to sell that Le'Veon Bell gets 15 touches. Then we have the Raiders playing Tom Brady this week. Las Vegas Raiders hold Tom Brady to under 20 points. Tom Brady is projected 20.21 fantasy points this week. The Raiders didn't hold Pat Mahomes to under 20. I think Pat Mahomes still got the upper 20 area. But Pat Mahomes, as of right now, is definitely better than Tom Brady. And Tom Brady just hasn't looked good this year. And being a Tom Brady hater, you could say, for this year, I'm going to go ahead and sell that one as well. I don't think that he has a great week, and I believe in the Raiders defense against him. Chase Claypool is the number 1 wide receiver for the Pittsburgh Steelers against the Titans. He has been the number 1 receiver for them in terms of fantasy points for the past 2 weeks. I sold on Chase Claypool once. I am not doing that again. I am buying that, and, watch this be the week that I was supposed to sell and he doesn't become the number 1 receiver and Juju Smith-Schuster finally takes off. But I'm going to buy that one, and, hopefully he doesn't burn me this week. Kyler Murray has 15 or more completions this week. He only had 9 against Dallas. I'm going to buy that for sure. I mean, he is a quarterback, and 15 completions honestly isn't a lot. It was just a weird game for him against Dallas. He still scored a lot of points. I think he'll do just fine this week, and I think he has 15 receptions. All right, so we are moving on from this. If Brock does reply to me by the end of the show, we will backtrack, and I will give you Brock's buy or sells for each one of those. All right, let's move on to the It's a Lock.
Lock it up.
All right, last week I gave Ryan Fitzpatrick the kiss of death. He was my It's a Lock against the New York Jets. We're going to have to come up with a criteria for what a successful It's a Lock is, because he had 23.95 fantasy points and won the football game and had 3 touchdowns, but he also had 191 yards and 2 interceptions. So I'm going to say that I did not get that right. just based on the fact that he threw for under 200 yards, threw for 2 interceptions, and it was against the Jets. So I'm going to say I missed out on that one, and we no longer get any Fitzmagic this season. Unless Tua does terrible, but I don't see that happening. So I think I missed out on that one. And then Brock had Adam Thielen versus Atlanta. His is also kind of tough because Adam Thielen still scored 14.1 points, had a touchdown, but only had 3 catches and 51 yards. I mean, yeah, we're definitely going to have to come up with a criteria for this because those are 2 good fantasy outputs in terms of points for both those guys, but production-wise, not really. So I'm going to say Brock and I both missed on the It's a Lock from last week. Moving on to this week, I am all in on Josh Allen. He is in my league of record. He is my starting quarterback. And I traded away Aaron Rodgers, putting full faith in Josh Allen. So Josh Allen, he's my start of the week. He's playing the Jets, which, again, play everybody against the Jets. But not only that, Josh Allen played the Jets in week 1 and scored 31 fantasy points against them. He has had 2 down weeks, though. Only 263 yards, 2 touchdowns, and 2 interceptions for 16.3 fantasy points against Tennessee, and only 122 yards, 2 touchdowns, and an interception for 15.08 fantasy points against the Chiefs. I think Josh Allen makes his roaring comeback this week. I think not only does he have a good week, I think he has a fantastic week. I think Josh Allen could score somewhere in the neighborhood of 40 points this week because he's playing the Jets and they're awful, and he already scored 31 against them in week 1, and I feel like he's definitely got a little fire in his belly from not playing well the last 2 weeks. So Josh Allen is my It's a Lock player this week. Brock is being a little risky as well with his. He says Clyde Edwards-Helaire versus Denver is a lock. When he told me this, I was like, are you sure? They have Le'Veon Bell now. You don't think that'll kind of cut into it? Because there is that possible split between Le'Veon and Clyde Edwards-Helaire. But Clyde had a huge game in his last outing. Was the top 5 running back. 26 carries, 161 rushing yards, and 4 catches for 8 yards against Buffalo. That was his first 20-point week of the season. And maybe Le'Veon Bell coming in put a pep in his step and said, hey, I really gotta do something because I don't want Le'Veon Bell to just walk in here and take my job. But Clyde hasn't had a touchdown since week 1, and the Denver defense is actually only giving up an average of 10.8 points to running backs this season, which 10.8, and if you're splitting that between 2 guys, only comes around to 5 points. But, Brock thinks he's still going to be a lock because he looked so good last week and has looked really good all season. So we will just have to see. Let us know what you think down below in the comments. But that was It's a Lock this week. Let's move on to another kind of new segment, the Fantasy Sleepers.
It's time for bed, boys.
All right. My Fantasy Sleepers this week at quarterback, it's Justin Herbert versus Jacksonville. He's projected 18.53 fantasy points this week against Jacksonville. Jacksonville isn't great, They aren't the defense that they used to be at all. So, and I'm sold on Justin Herbert. I have him in my secondary league. He is my starting quarterback, and I believe he will be my starting quarterback for the remainder of the season. I am completely bought into him, and he has 20-plus fantasy points in 3 of 4 games this year. Sorry, and I think he's kind of getting slept on, and especially against the Jaguars, I think he comes out and has another 20-plus point game and maybe even a 30-point game. I think he's got a good chance to go out and do something crazy. At the running back position, Devin Singletary versus the Jets, just because he's playing the Jets. And the Jets give up an average of 22 points to running backs per week. Devin Singletary doesn't really split with anybody. You have Zach Moss also in that backfield, but I don't know if Zach Moss is fully healthy, and I don't think even if he is healthy, he's going to cut into Devin Singletary that much. Singletary's only projected 13.6 fantasy points and only had 10.3 against the Jets in week 1. But again, I think this is the Bills' roaring comeback week after 2 tough losses. After starting 4-0, I think they come back this week and absolutely tear the roof off of the place. At wide receiver, I think Travis Fulgham versus the New York Giants. I have already said I am playing Travis Fulgham. And I am playing him possibly over Allen Robinson. He's only projected 13.3 fantasy points, but he has a touchdown in each of his 3 games played. And like I said earlier, I like the idea that he is more consistent to get a touchdown than some of the other options. And playing the Giants, that's just a good matchup. Terry McLaurin last week had 7 receptions for 74 yards, 14.4 fantasy points. If you threw a touchdown in there, he would have had a 20-point game. And I think Travis Fulgham can put up a line like that and also put up a touchdown against the New York Giants, who have given up 20-plus points in 4 of the 6 weeks to opposing fantasy wide receivers. And they've given up 6 touchdowns to wide receivers. So I just really, really like the matchup for Fulgham this week. And, he's a guy that, first of all, everybody's sleeping on to even put on their rosters, let alone start him this week. Darren Fells at the tight end position is my sleeper at tight end. He's playing Green Bay, and he's only projected 4.6 fantasy points. The absolute disrespect here. He has 3 touchdowns this season. He had 6 catches for 85 yards and a touchdown against Tennessee. And Deshaun Watson in the last 2 games, like we have talked about, the Houston Texans have been lighting it up the last 2 weeks. And Deshaun Watson is leading that with nearly 700 yards passing in 2 weeks and 7 touchdowns. Darren Fells is going to be a beneficiary, as is Will Fuller and Brandon Cooks. But Darren Fells, guys, I think he's getting slept this week, and he's going to go out and play the Packers, who let Rob Gronkowski run all over them. So I think it's a good week for Darren Fells against the Packers. Alrighty, let's move on to our prime time picks.
Oh yeah, it's football time.
Alright, before we get into our prime time picks, let's take a review of the prime time picks from last week. The Sunday night review, again, I was an idiot. Completely skipped over the Sunday night preview because I thought the Sunday night game was Kansas City and Buffalo. Turns out I was very wrong. It was the Los Angeles Rams and the San Francisco 49ers. A game that looks like it was close on paper. The final score was 24-16. The 49ers took it. But the Rams offense did not play well. And somehow they still kept in the game. I mean, but they didn't look good. And the score makes it look like it was a lot closer than what it was. The 49ers just played really well. Jimmy Garoppolo came out after getting benched last week or the week before and playing not well because of that ankle. They drew up a really good game plan for him. Throw the ball quick, don't get hit, throw short, and it really worked out. Went 23 of 33 for 268 yards and 3 touchdowns. That translated to 23.9 fantasy points for him. Raheem Mostert, again, he played one half of football and had 19 touches for 76 yards and 9.6 fantasy points. The guy is a machine once he's healthy. And hopefully, especially for my sake, Raheem Mostert, get well soon, man, because you are you're just a great player, all right? You did great, one half a play, almost 20 touches, near 100 yards. Fantastic. George Kittle had 7 catches, 109 yards, and a touchdown for 23.9 fantasy points. Played very well. And then you had Deebo Samuel, 6 catches, 66 yards, and a touchdown. Had 18 fantasy points. The 49ers offense, they just played really well. And they had a great game plan coming in, and it neutralized Aaron Donald. And just a complete game and a great game plan from the 49ers. The Rams, on the other hand, Jared Goff went 19 of 38 for 198 yards and 2 touchdowns with an interception for only 14.92 fantasy points. You had Darrell Henderson. He carried the ball 14 times for 88 yards and only 9.2 fantasy points. Then you had Robert Woods, only 4 catches for 29 yards, but he did have a touchdown. And then Tyler Higbee, the guy's all over the place, but he had 3 catches for 56 yards. Man, Tyler Higbee, he's burned me almost every single week since I picked him up, besides his 3 touchdown week. He's an irritating fella. But again, the scorecard definitely showed that the game was closer than it was. San Francisco pretty much completely controlled that game. And I think the Rams will have a comeback week. I think they'll do just fine. But they just looked very, very bad this past Sunday. Moving on to the Monday afternoon review. Man, 2020 is so weird. You have Tuesday night games, Monday afternoon games, no Thursday night games. Just a bunch of weirdness going on, but it was the Kansas City Chiefs and the Buffalo Bills. And again, this one, the box score makes it look like it was closer than it was. Buffalo played absolutely awful. The Chiefs won 26-17. Guess I should say that. But Josh Allen was only 14 of 27 for 121 passing yards, 2 touchdowns, and an interception. And he actually led the team in rushing with 8 carries for 42 yards. Like I said last week, Josh Allen is the whole offense. He's either throwing the ball or he's running the ball. And he contributes for about 80% of that offense. Then you had Stephon Diggs, had 6 catches, 46 yards, and a touchdown, along with Cole Beasley, 4 catches for 45 yards and a touchdown. It was a tough game when Cole Beasley is your second best wide receiver on the team. And that's no disrespect to Cole Beasley, but if he's one of your top guys for the week, your offense struggled for sure. For the Chiefs, Pat Mahomes looked magical. 21 for 26, 225 yards, and 2 touchdowns. He also carried the ball for 10 times for 26 yards. Clyde Edwards-Helaire, as we said, had his best game of the season, 26 carries for 161 yards. And, I mean, it was a cold, rainy day, and it was prime time for Clyde Edwards-Helaire to just run the ball a bunch and help the Chiefs salt away a victory. And then, Travis Kelce, highlighted him as well. 5 catches, 65 yards, and 2 touchdowns. Brock and I both chose the Chiefs, taking us up above 500 to 4-3. Moving on to the Monday night review, you had Arizona and Dallas. Again, Dallas played absolutely awful. Arizona won 38-10. And how bad do you have to play for a quarterback to only complete 9 passes and still beat you 38-10? Ridiculous. Kyler Murray, 9 for 24, only 188 yards, did have 2 touchdowns through the air, and rushed the ball 10 times for 74 yards and another touchdown. And then you had Kenyon Drake, just coming out of nowhere, being Kenyon Drake all of a sudden again. 20 carries, 164 yards, and 2 touchdowns. And then Christian Kirk, the 2 receptions for 86 yards and 2 touchdowns. Let's kind of dive into Dallas's terrible offense. I think it is just for this week, maybe next week. They have to get the chemistry there between Andy Dalton and all of his receivers. But Andy Dalton was so here's a synopsis for how the first half went. And I can sum it up in one play. Andy Dalton drops back to pass, has nobody open, nearly gets sacked, and just decides to throw it up into the middle of the field where no one is there except for a Arizona linebacker. The Arizona linebacker has a 100%, let's go ahead and knock it down to 99.9% chance to intercept this duck of a pass from Andy Dalton, and he drops it. That's how the first half went. It was just absolutely awful, and that's how the entire game went for the Dallas Cowboys. Just absolutely terrible. You had Andy Dalton throw the ball 54 times, only complete 34 of those for only 266 yards and a touchdown, and then he threw 2 interceptions. Like I said, it should have been 3. He threw it right to the Cardinals linebacker, and I guess that's why you play defense, because you don't have those hands. Zeke Elliott, again, and this is the hard part about Zeke. He hasn't had a 100-yard rushing game, but he always has 75 or more total yards on the game. He had 12 carries, 49 yards, 8 catches for 31 yards. But the big story for him was his 2 fumbles. And that really was the story for the Cowboys offense, was 4 turnovers. And when 2 of them come from the guy that is supposed to be your crutch in this time, a little scary, a little disappointing. But again, I expect Zeke to come back next week and do just fine. And then, Andy Dalton, at least he knows who the top receivers in Dallas are. He got Amari Cooper 7 catches for 79 yards and a touchdown, and CeeDee Lamb 7 catches for 64 yards. So at least Andy Dalton kind of knows where to go with the ball. He just needs to remember how to be a quarterback that isn't absolutely awful, because that's what he was this last week, was absolutely awful. Brock and I both chose Arizona, knocking us up. Wow. That's an unfortunate series of words that just came out of my mouth right there. Bumping us up to 6-3. Moving on to the Thursday night preview, we have a barn burner of a game. Get ready, set your DVRs, don't go anywhere, watch this game. 100% best game of the week. You got the New York Giants 1-5 and the Philadelphia Eagles 1-3-1. Like my build up for that? Oh yeah. Community poll says Philadelphia will win 87%. The over-under for the game, 43.5. It's kind of a big over-under for these two teams. I don't know if I buy that. Anyway, the terrible New York Giants are tied for 31st in total offense, 21st in total defense. They are the 30th ranked passing offense and the 30th ranked rushing offense. And they are the 16th ranked pass defense, but they are a top 10 rushing defense, which is a good thing to look out at, especially with for the Eagles having to start, what is his name? Boston Scott. Yeah, so, I mean, maybe the Giants do just all right against the run game this week. But Philly has a 27th ranked offense and the 16th ranked defense. They are 26th as a passing offense and 13th as a rushing offense. And defensively, they are 12th against the pass and 21st against the run. Some players to kind of look out for. You got Daniel Jones. 9 turnovers in 6 games. Only 3 touchdowns. He has 0 300-yard games, and he has less than 20 fantasy points in 5 of 6 games. Yeah. That Giants fans, that is your quarterback. Congratulations. You put a lot into him. Devontae Freeman, he's got 164 yards in the last 4 games and a touchdown. He's averaging about 16.5 touches per game. I feel like he's slowly becoming more of a part of this offense, and with how bad Daniel Jones is, they're gonna have to try to run the ball more. But when they're losing, you can't run the ball the whole time while you're losing, I guess. But Devontae Freeman, definitely a guy that I think they need to get more involved. But he's been steadily getting more touches, more production, so he's a guy to look out for. Darius Slayton, he leads the team in receiving yards and touchdowns, but he is questionable for this game, being that it's a being that it is dear Lord, being in a world where we have football on Tuesdays, sometimes it is really screwing me up. Being that it is a Thursday game, he'll probably be a game time decision. We probably won't know whether or not he's playing until right up before game time. So keep an eye on that. But if you're going to start anybody for the Giants, it should be Darius Slayton if he's playing. On the other side, you got Carson Wentz coming off of a 3-touchdown game in his 4th straight 20-point fantasy game. In a divisional game against Washington, he threw for 270 yards and 2 touchdowns. Being that this is a divisional game, maybe he goes out and plays really well. I'm not a believer in Carson Wentz, but the Giants are also terrible, so, Wentz might do just fine. Boston Scott, we already talked about. Miles Sanders is out, so he's going to have to carry a lot of the bulk that Miles Sanders was carrying. But, the Giants aren't fantastic. I mean, they do have a good rushing defense, but you never know. Boston Scott, he's a guy to look out for because he will be the main guy in the backfield. And then you have Travis Fulgham. I can't preach this guy enough. You definitely need to start him. He has 3 straight weeks with a touchdown. And against 2 really good defenses, he had 10 catches for 152 yards and a touchdown versus Pittsburgh, and then 6 receptions and 75 yards for a touchdown against Baltimore. Jackson and Jeffrey are still questionable, and Jalen Reagor is still on IR. So Travis Fulgham, he has proven that he can produce against good defenses. I'm excited to see what he's going to do against a really bad defense. Brock and I both choose Philadelphia in this one. Hopefully it's a good game. I mean, I doubt it. I normally kind of poop on the Thursday night games because they are laughingstock teams playing each other, but Thursday nights, I mean, when 2 bad teams are against each other, it's not a bad game sometimes, you know? Both teams play really well and make it exciting, so we'll just have to wait and see. Moving on to the Sunday night preview, you have the Tampa Bay Buccaneers at 4-2 against the Las Vegas Raiders at 3-2. This one is tough for me. The community poll says 69% Tampa Bay with an over-under of 53. What makes this hard is that Tampa Bay's offense is really bad, but they have the best defense in the league. Ranked number 1 in defense, number 6 in pass defense, and number 1 in rushing defense. So they're really good defensively, and the way that they shut down Green Bay last week was very impressive. But my dilemma is that they have the 20th ranked offense, and they're not very good. They're the 17th passing offense and the 20th rushing offense, so I'm just not sold. It's tough. Then you got the Las Vegas Raiders, who are the number 6 offense in the league, but they are the 24th defense in the league. So both teams are on the higher and lower end on each side. The Raiders are 5th in passing offense, 14th in rushing offense, 25th in passing defense, and 22nd in rush defense, So, I mean, it's just a hard game because the Raiders, their offense looked really good against the Chiefs, who also have a great defense, but their defense isn't all that great. And then you have Tampa Bay, who has just a really scary defense, to be honest. So I'm not confident in Las Vegas in this game. Tom Brady, some players to look out for. Tom Brady, very funny. TB12 is also QB12 on the year. His last 2 games is this? Yeah. His last 2 games, only 253 yards and a touchdown against Chicago and a brain fart on 4th down. And then the 166 yards and 2 touchdowns against Green Bay. Again, not sold on Tom Brady. He's a goner, and the only chance that this offense has is Ronald Jones, who is the running back 13 this year, averaging 15.1 fantasy points per game. And he has 3 straight 100-yard games and 2 touchdowns last week against Green Bay. So my formula for the Tampa Bay offense is get that man the ball and let him do some work. Also kind of look out for Mike Evans. He's the wide receiver 18 this year, averages a touchdown a week, but he only has 2 100-yard games, and last week against the Packers had only 1 reception for 10 yards. Look out for him. I mean, maybe, probably start him because he's Mike Evans, but don't have high expectations. Rob Gronkowski, business is starting to pick up for Rob Gronkowski. He had 5 catches, 78 yards, and a touchdown versus Green Bay, and he's projected 11.3 points. Rob kind of looked like the old Gronk last week, and Brady was looking to him the way he used to look to him. So Rob Gronkowski, kind of interesting, especially in this matchup against the Raiders, who don't have a great defense. Derek Carr, I highlighted him in the waivers. He's the quarterback 18 this year, 11 touchdowns and only 1 interception. Do have to highlight that he has 4 fumbles because this is a stingy defense and they could take the ball away from him either way. But he's coming off back-to-back 300-yard multi-touchdown games against Buffalo and Kansas City, 2 pretty good defenses. So again, it's just kind of a toss-up. I don't know really what's going to happen. I mean, I feel like Tampa Bay's defense is just going to harass him and eat him up, but there is a chance that Derek Carr just plays really well, So it's going to be interesting to see. Josh Jacobs, he's the running back 12 on the year, has 5 touchdowns and 100 scrimmage yards in only 2 games, but has 20 plus carries in 3 games, and Tampa's defense are they less stout against the run? No, they have the first ranked rushing defense. So, I mean, Josh Jacobs is a great running back, so you're just going to have to, because you can't take him out, you got to start Josh Jacobs, but you're definitely sweating if he is in your lineup on whether or not he's going to score. Henry Ruggs, their last game had 2 catches, 118 yards and a touchdown versus Kansas City. He has been injured for a while, and that was his comeback game. And the fact that, sure, he only had 2 catches, but one of them was a bomb, a 70-plus yard bomb, gives the Raiders a deep threat. And he, I feel like, could be a game changer in this game, especially if they're getting a lot of pressure. Tampa Bay's getting a lot of pressure on Derek Carr, and you can just send Henry Ruggs flying down the field and let Derek Carr bomb it to him, could be a game changer. And then you have Darren Waller, who's the tight end 4, has 15-plus fantasy points in 3 of his 5 games this year and 2 touchdowns. Oh, and breaking news. We have to retract a little bit. I'll go ahead and tell you who Brock and I picked. We both picked Tampa Bay in the game, but Brock has replied with his buy or sells, so he is going to go ahead and respond to those in just a moment. Man, Brock just woke up apparently, so we will get his buy or sells here. What a lazy guy. I wonder if he even listens to the show when I post it, He's not here for 2 weeks. You think the least he could do is wake up and give me a text, huh? Just busting his balls, but he is looking at those right now. Gonna send me his buy or sells for this week, and they are in. All right, so here we go. The Julio Jones has 100 yards or a touchdown against Detroit. Brock is selling that. Very interesting. I would like to ask him why he is selling that, but he is not here. So we will write Brock down for a sell on that. A reminder that I bought that, so we will just have to see how that goes for him. I think it's a good buy. Le'Veon Bell has 15 touches against Buffalo. Brock is going to sell that as well. I sold it. And moving on. The Las Vegas Raiders hold Tom Brady to under 20 points. Brock is also selling that, and I sold it as well. Chase Claypool is the number 1 receiver for the Pittsburgh Steelers. Brock is going to buy that, as I did. And the final one, Kyler Murray has 15 or more completions. He is buying that as well. Okay, back to your regularly scheduled program, folks. Thank you, Brock, for finally waking up and giving us your buy or sells. Moving on to the Monday night preview. We got Chicago and the Los Angeles Rams. Chicago sitting at 5-1, the Rams sitting at 4-2. The community poll says 66% Los Angeles Rams. Interesting. The over-under is 45 points. And taking a look at these teams, Chicago, we know that they have a terrible offense and a good defense, ranked 28th on offense, 7th on defense. And the Rams are just pretty good all around. I mean, they didn't really show it last week, but they are the 10th ranked offense and the 4th ranked defense. And when you have Aaron Donald, you're going to have a good defense. Taking a look at the players, I think it's kind of hard. I think the whole Chicago offense will struggle. You got Nick Foles, who's only averaging 14.3 points this season and has an interception in each of his 4 games that he has played. And against 2 really good defenses, he only threw for 249 yards, a touchdown and interception against Indy, and 243 yards, a touchdown and an interception against Tampa Bay. I think he struggles this week. The Rams are a great defense, probably not better than Tampa Bay, but still, I am not confident in Nick Foles at all this week. Another guy to look out for, David Montgomery. He's the running back 18 this year, averaging 13.5 fantasy points. He only has 1 touchdown, and he's only rushed for more than 50 yards in half of his games. I think he has another down game. And then we move on to Allen Robinson. He's the wide receiver 12 this season. He has 5 or more receptions in every single week except for week 1. And he has 2 weeks with 10 receptions. Again, I highlighted that I am scared to play Allen Robinson this week. So much so that I'm playing Travis Fulgham over him. Might plug in Allen Robinson into my flex position because it's hard. It's hard not to put in Allen Robinson, who is one of the only targets for Chicago. But this defense is so good. I'm sure Jalen Ramsey will be following Allen Robinson around, and Jalen Ramsey is a shutdown corner. So I just think it's a very tough week offensively for Chicago. But then if you look at the Rams offense, they have Jared Goff, who's the quarterback 13, only 10 touchdowns, has 4 interceptions, and last week he only had 198 yards, 2 touchdowns, and an interception against San Francisco. And Chicago is giving up the least amount of fantasy points to quarterbacks. So I think Jared Goff himself is going to struggle as well. Darrell Henderson Jr., he's the running back 22. He only has 1 game over 100 yards, and he has 3 weeks of 20 points or more in fantasy. So he might be a bright spot against a Bears defense that's really good. The Bears defensively against the run are 14th. So, I mean, they're kind of mid-tier in that area. So I think Darrell Henderson may be the only bright spot for this team. You got Cooper Kupp, who's the wide receiver 23. Last week, he only had 3 catches for 11 yards against San Francisco. And then you have Robert Woods, who's the wide receiver 13. And he had 4 catches for 29 yards and a touchdown against San Francisco. But he only has 2 weeks with over 5 catches. And going up against a Chicago defense that's really good, I don't know if I see anything great coming from the Rams offense. Brock and I are picking different here. I think the Rams are going to win for the fact that the Bears don't have as good of an offense and the Rams have to have a better defense. I see Nick Foles struggling, and I see the Rams defense shutting down Chicago more than Chicago shutting down the Rams. Brock is a homer. He's going to go with his Bears. So we'll just have to see how that works out. Anyway, guys, that is it for this week. Again, we are on YouTube. Got to give you the spiel. Hit that like button. Hit subscribe. Follow our Facebook page. And come back next week. Brock will finally be back, and we have a little special episode for his return. We're pretty excited about it, and we think it'll be a lot of fun. Hopefully you guys will enjoy it as well, but you got to tune in next week for that. Thanks for tuning in. See you guys next week.